start this video off by telling a little story from when I was in 5th grade. That year we had a field trip to the zoo, and while usually my school had uniforms, we were allowed to wear whatever we wanted for the occasion. For me, that meant my go-to outfit during my preteens. The top was a size too big t-shirt that I got from a random sports camp. The shorts were of the basketball variety. On my feet were a pair of basketball sneakers. And, to finish it all off, a backwards hat. As you might be able to tell by now, I was what some may call a tomboy. Despite having always dressed like a neon kid, that day at the zoo was the first time I had been called anything other than a girl. Not just once, but twice within the same day. One of the times was by a zoo employee that was working the train. They said something like, "You can step forward, little boy," which I thought was really funny. I even went to tell one of the parent chaperones what had happened, thinking that they would think it was cool that I was mistaken too. They reacted in quite the opposite way though. They felt bad for me. "I'm so sorry, Colleen. You don't look like a boy. No one would even say that to you if you didn't dress that way." I felt a little ashamed. In fact, from then on, I kept getting comments that were pushing me towards dressing more girly. Media was also showing me during this time that anytime a teen girl was a tomboy, it was only a matter of when she would have a long overdue makeover and become more feminine. Lily Truscott from Hannah Montana was this really cool skater chick that I tried so hard to dress like when I was in 8th grade. However, in an episode, she was berated by her friend Miley for not being girly enough. Along with the boy giving her attention that episode, she changed her appearance to dress more like a girl. Sure, this episode is all about being yourself, but the series contradicts itself when Lily starts dressing more feminine after this episode. As more time went on, the less I thought dressing masculine was cool. Everything in the world was telling me otherwise. That is until I started reading manga. Specifically shoujo manga. There, I found countless protagonists that didn't fall strictly within the gender binary. Not only were there tomboy characters, but there were also girls who dressed or disguised themselves as a boy on purpose. They did it despite being told to be more like a girl, despite being told to wear skirts, act soft, or be demure. They were just, in a more traditional sense, masculine, subverting the expectations set on them by society to transform into girlhood. This type of media may have been the first time that I was not made to feel ashamed for embracing my boyish, loud, and playful side. I think to engage with this video, you first have to come from a place of recognizing that gender is a construct. In line with the theory of Judith Butler, try saying that 5 times, oh my god, gender is a performance we embody through stylized repetition. We perform the gender that society says coincides with our sex. It begins at the gender reveal party that caused a wildfire in your neighborhood, to the doctor's office you were born in, then follows you through school, and so on. You are taught to speak, act, and dress a certain way because of the gender that you were assigned at birth. For example, people who were assigned female at birth are often taught to cross their legs and suck in their stomachs throughout childhood and into adulthood. Would AFABs have chosen to cross their legs this way if not for the repeated instruction to do so? Or would BuzzFeed have been writing articles in an alternate universe about woman spreading? This is just a small and somewhat inconsequential learned performance, but this repetition is how we end up in gender roles that society has given. Women are blobs with dresses, while men are blobs with nothing on, I guess. Whether we think of it consciously or not, we all perform our gender in the most comfortable way that we can. These gender expectations are also ever-changing with the accepted societal values of whatever time period we currently inhabit. See how pink used to be a color more associated with boys and men, until it became more associated with Barbie. With this, we can assume that whether we were assigned male or female at birth, the gender we perform after is one culturally, through all its continuous changes, given to us. Shoujo manga has had a long history of questioning gender identity, subverting gender roles, and overall just playing with the ideas of what gender is. This is in spite of the origins of shoujo magazines having come from the desire to make young girls become good wives and wise mothers. These magazines were first thought as a vehicle to push the new Confucian ideas and later the patriarchal values of the West after World War II. Once more women started to take over the narratives of shoujo in the late 60s, it had increasingly become a medium where they could freely express the strict roles placed on their identity. The feminist movement in Japan was starting to gain traction in this time, and the examination of gender was becoming a hot topic issue due to the oppressive patriarchal structures. That isn't to say that playing with gender in Japan was invented by shoujo manga. Far from it. Most countries have a history of gender bending or cross-dressing in their performance arts. I mean, that's just gonna happen anyway when women are barred from even being able to be in a theater troupe, and Japan was no exception in this regard either. They had the all-male kabuki theater, which dates back to around the late Edo period, where men performed both gendered roles. For a period of time, no theater was another performance art that didn't allow women to take part. However, since then, they've changed their ways and they've now allowed women to perform no theater. The most notable performers for this video topic in Japan, though, is the Takarazuka Revue, an all-female acting, singing, dancing troupe that puts on more Broadway-style productions. It was created in the 1910s as a bit of a response to kabuki's old stuffy traditions. Takarazuka performances have the actors playing the roles of men and women, with most of the actors sticking to one type of role. There's the musumeyaku, or actors who just play the women, and the otokoyaku, or the actors who play the men. This acting troupe has become widely popular in Japan, with a large amount of their fans being women. A playwright for the review states the reason there's so many women fans for this troupe is because of the fantasy that it gives them. These women dress masculine, but they aren't men, so they don't assert themselves over their fans in a patriarchal way. Researcher Erica Abbott, however, thinks that the reason that there are so many women fans is because of the subversion of gender norms. This subversion is displayed despite the fact that, once again, the review was made to show women how to be good wives and wise mothers. Society imposes rules on what they think a woman should be, and they just keep making iconic gender-subverting media. Where the Takarazuka Revue and shoujo intersect is how the review most likely inspired prolific mangaka Osamu Tezuka to create his seminal work, Princess Knight. This was a shoujo manga made in 1953 about a young girl named Sapphire who must pretend to be a boy so she can take over her father's throne. In the story, it said that she has both a blue and pink heart, which is why she's able to pretend to be a prince so well. While that view of gender may be dated, this series was very popular amongst shoujo fans at the time. Princess Knight is said to be the progenitor of the magical girl genre, as well as narrative-driven shoujo stories. The overall narrative of a girl pretending to be a boy was a fascinatingly new trope for shoujo manga, though. As stated before, most shoujo magazines were made to show how to be a model woman. And although it is stereotypical, Princess Knight showed something different for the time. This idea of a girl cross-dressing, which most likely stemmed from Tezuka's love of Takarazuka theater, gave way to even more cross-dressing and tomboy heroines. They may not have explicitly broken gender binaries, but they challenged traditional gender roles all the same. Characters like Lady Oscar from Rose of Versailles and Utena from Revolutionary Girl Utena have been dissected by scholars for decades now as women who subvert gender roles, often considered to be girl princes. These two don't try to hide their genders under different clothes, but they also don't do the typical performances expected of women. They are involved in duels, wear more masculine clothing, and are considered to be chivalrous. Oscar dresses masculine as she was raised this way by her father to later take up his place as captain of the Royal Guard. Due to her upbringing, she is both a capable leader and duelist herself, ousting many of the men she leads in combat. Despite Oscar's father wanting her to take his place, he still desires her to dress femininely and find a husband. However, Oscar feels a sense of duty towards her role as the protector of France. She isn't opposed to love though, she just doesn't want to fall into the trappings of feminine gender roles. In Utena's case, her appearance doesn't adhere to the typical uniform seen at her school. She desires to be a noble prince, and her admiration of a certain prince she met in her childhood drives this attitude. Utena opts for shorts under a frilly military-looking blazer instead of the usual sailor school uniform like the other girls wear. The way that she decides to dress is commented on by the teachers at the school, and they push her to conform. She also engages in sword fights to save or protect other fellow classmates. And because of this, many girls at her school form crushes on Utena because of her demeanor. The tradition of girl princes has continued on throughout the years of shoujo history. Although within the fantasy realm, it has turned towards the cross-dressing realm once again, similar to that of Princess Knight. Popular stories like Basara, Prince Freya, and the King's Beast see the heroines dressing like boys to achieve their goals. In these cases, the cross-dressing is more to allow them freedom that isn't given to women under the patriarchy, rather than to actually be gender subverting. All of these protagonists identify as girls, but must hide their femininity under a disguise and perform as men. These girl princes that cross-dress are often characterized by their desire to be feminine and eventually return to their true self. They want to be seen as a girl through traditional appearances, donning frilly dresses, taking up feminine hobbies like knitting, wearing makeup, or being called pretty. Femininity is a performance for them that they would also like to engage in, even if this performance does align with their assigned gender. There is much more importance that is placed on a heroine who dresses masculine and doesn't desire to be feminine, usually because femininity is seen as less than or undesirable, and especially when masculine attributes are available. I can also see where the importance of this comes from too, though. The concept of a woman dressing like man is much more subversive and plays with gender dynamics. It gives us more room to question the binary. However, if it's true that gender is a performance, then that performance must be acknowledged by and for every person, whether it aligns or subverts. In the manga series, In the Clear Moonlit Dusk, we are introduced to a character named Yoi. Our first introduction to this character is through the lens of two girls who are rushing to catch the train, and Yoi helps them out. They both see Yoi's incredible beauty with flowers blooming behind and sparkles dancing about. They think that Yoi looks like a literal prince, but when they see Yoi's skirt, they realize that she, at least from the outside traditional perspective, is a girl. Yoi's appearance in this series is extremely androgynous. If it weren't for the binary division of gendered school dress codes, Yoi may never even be identified as a girl. For starters, she wears her hair short, similar to the style of 90s heartthrobs like Jonathan Taylor Thomas and Leonardo DiCaprio. Outside of school, her wardrobe consists of things like large t-shirts, pants, and hoodies. It's also said in the series that she has a lower voice and a more Bishonen face. All of this coupled with the fact that she can fight back against wrongdoings. These are all things that we do not think of when we think of traditional femininity. Simply put, Yoi is gender envy. There is a dichotomy with Yoi that I find really interesting in this series. Yoi has a desire to be seen as a girl. She wants people to treat her less as a prince and more just like any other girl that's attending school. However, at the same time, Yoi has no desire to change her appearance to adhere to the standard of girlhood. She doesn't express a desire to grow out her hair or start wearing skirts outside of school to be viewed in this way. The few times she does wear more feminine clothes, they still align with a more androgynous way of dressing that we see nowadays. For example, not exactly showing off any figure, being oversized and flowy. Yoi's desire to be seen as a girl is more just in how society views her. What I find so interesting is that she plays on this trope in a more androgynous way. It's clear that Yoi is kind of a parody on the girl prince already. She's literally called a prince at her school, and roses pop up behind her whenever she's being her cool, stoic self. The typical girl prince is forced into cross-dressing for outside reasons, but inwardly desires to be feminine. In Yoi's case, though, she is just Yoi without any outside influences. She likes the way that she dresses and looks, but she doesn't like how society views her because of this. They don't view her performance or who she truly is as being acceptable enough by societal standards of what a girl should be. The caveat that comes with this manga, though, is that it does fall back on the acceptance of a man's gaze that she is a girl. Even here, though, I find that the boy in question, Ichimura, is much more accepting of her androgyny than in similar manga like it. He never pushes her to be more feminine and simply finds her intriguing even when he thinks that she is a boy. Ichimura even states at one point that he would probably fall in love with Yoi whether she fell on the binary viewpoint of being a boy or a girl. Bicon. He just likes her for her. So while it does kind of fall back on the dictation of femininity being on a man's love, I guess it does it well, at least. Less forceful of the girl to be feminine? Baby steps, I know. A similar way in which androgyny has been examined in shoujo is from the manga series Requiem of the Rose King, which could not be more opposite of the tone and genre than in The Clear Moonlit Dusk. This manga's main character is a boy named Richard who was born intersex. We are shown that he was born with a chest as well as the lower parts more associated with men. His birth and upbringing was full of shame, which was placed on him by his mother, who called him a demon for his body. Richard felt like nothing other than a man, though. He wanted to be just like his father, who was the king and achieved great things on the battlefield. Following in his footsteps, he threw himself into sword fighting. He enjoyed traditionally masculine hobbies like hunting and engaging in politics. The only real difference between him and his brothers was that he had a much thinner frame. He also had to wrap his chest in fear that anyone might find out of the shame that his mother placed upon him. Throughout the story, Richard is frequently placed in dresses and made to perform femininity for others. It's usually meant as a disguise or forced upon him, even though he expresses his discomfort in wearing these clothing. Each time he wears a dress, the other characters will tell him how beautiful he looks and immediately fall in love with him. And each time, he doesn't truly feel like himself. It is nothing more than a performance of gender. He fears how people will view him with these clothes on, as he doesn't want to be seen as a woman. Scared that how he identifies himself will never be enough with how he looks. The fear of being the other is what drives Richard to a more harmful idea of masculinity. His mother makes him feel unworthy because of his body, making him feel like he has to exist on one end or the other of the binary. Due to his body, though, he didn't feel like he would ever fully be accepted as a man unless proven. Even then, he didn't let anyone else see him out of the fear of being unwanted. It isn't until towards the end that Richard comes to terms with his identity and his true self more. He blends both the feminine with the masculine because he's more secure in his identity as a man. Essentially, he ends his performance to allow himself to just be Richard. There is no need to follow in the footsteps of his father or feel the wrath of his mother. He fully accepts himself for who he is in spite of the strict aesthetics of gender that society places on us. Both Yoi and Richard are subject to a strict dictation of gender because of their appearances. While they both have similar haircuts and physiques, the gender they identify as is opposing to how others view them. Yoi looks too masculine to be feminine, and Richard looks too feminine to be masculine in the eyes of society. Neither meet the guidelines of what the binary genders are supposed to look or act like. The very act of not changing themselves to fit in these stereotypical boxes is, in a way, subversion. Sometimes the gender subversion is not just in appearances, though, but in the roles assigned to the binary, the attitudes or physicalities taught to girls and boys since birth. Much like the one that I gave earlier about girls crossing their legs to seem more proper. Girls are taught to be gentle, demure, and soft. They are supposed to be more submissive and let the man in a heteronormative relationship take the lead. Meanwhile, boys are taught to be more confident, ambitious, and dominant. So then what what happens when people don't follow these physicalities or attitudes. Gender performance is questioned. One shoujo series that questions these strict roles assigned to gender is Seishun no Hekireki. The basic premise is that these two high school students, Amane and Hinase, are struck by lightning and their bodies switch. Through this premise, we are allowed to see how both of them explore how gender roles affect them in their daily lives. While both characters may be outwardly performing their gender through their appearance, they are not performing properly enough by societal structures due to their attitudes. Our main female lead is Amane, who is stereotypically feminine with her long hair and dress. The main issue that she faces in the series is wanting to go further in her relationships, although she finds herself not as attracted to her boyfriends once at that point. They'll come on to her, and instead of being into it, she freezes up, not really knowing how to react to their advances despite wanting it. This issue is not due to her being asexual or aromantic though. She comes to realize that she doesn't like to act the part of a submissive person like she has in previous relationships. Amane discovers once meeting Hinase that she likes to be the one to flirt first and get a little pushy. She finds that engaging the physical touch is what makes her feel most attracted to her partner, being the one to make Hinase blush, feel shy, and embarrassed rather than the other way around. This revelation subverts how women are seen as the ones to be dominated, that these men in straight relationships are the ones to be sexual and women are these pure, holy beings. Between the two of them, Amane is even the one with the most experience with dating as well. If this were any other scenario, she would be seen as promiscuous or even maybe weird. But it's because of the body swapping that Amane is able to comfortably explore her dominant masculine side without feeling judged. The contrast to Amane is our main male lead Hinase, who is more traditionally masculine, especially in the sense of a shoujo manga protagonist. He's the rich pretty boy who's the most popular kid at school, with women throwing themselves at him, almost to the point of absurdity at times, like he entrances them or something. His family expects him to be a leader to take over his father's role at their hospital. Hinase's mom is even the one to instill these strict rules of masculinity on him. This leads Hinase to believe that he is an embarrassment and a failure because he loses his cool around women, even more so when he rejects their sexual advances. Hinase is actually very shy. He only seems like a pompous playboy at school because of the masculinity that he must perform for others. When the two of them swap bodies, he is now able to indulge in his personality and interests without the fear of societal and family judgment. Japan has a belief that it is feminine to enjoy sweets, and now in Amane's body, he can enjoy the sugar he actually loves. Neither really express discomfort in their new bodies, besides the privacy aspect either. Amane specifically grows accustomed to it almost right away. She begins flirting with Hinase, who has her face, and she's never really weirded out by this fact, most likely because she is attracted to Hinase's personality and demeanor and not really his outward appearance, making these two characters look more inward at their performances rather than what they see on the outside. While Hinase may look traditionally masculine and Amane traditionally feminine, neither of them have a desire to act the way that's expected of them. The policing on how the two's attitudes must also align with the world's view of gender hinders them from fully being seen as what they identify as. Hinase may be the most quintessential shoujo boy out there, but the mere fact that he is not pouncing on women is seen as emasculating. He's seen as less of a man. Now, with all that being said, there are some pitfalls with the gender exploration in shoujo. These mistakes aren't unique to just this medium though, since most media in general will succumb to them as well. However, when looking back at all of the series that I've mentioned up until now, 7 out of the 9 of them end with straight relationships. The characters have spent their series exploring gender, and then by the end they can shed their masculine performance. Excited to start a nuclear family of their own one day, being the goodest of wives and wisest of mothers. It isn't at all to that extreme, but one series that I feel subverts and conforms to gender is Ouran High School Host Club. Our main character, Haruhi, must dress as a boy to pay off her debts to a host club. She starts this series off by saying she doesn't really care how other people see her gender as, since it's what's on the inside that counts. Which is a great message. Or it would be if the rest of the series didn't spend its entirety showing that girls are just fundamentally different from boys. Explaining to us that once you become an adult woman, you must shed any form of androgyny and fully brace femininity. We end the series with Haruhi having a coming out as a girl party at school. She has also gotten with a man despite enjoying the attention of women throughout the series. Haruhi no longer subverts gender performance like she did initially, and ends up conforming to the societal expectations of women. The cross-dressing is no longer subversive in this case. It's merely a gimmick to get Haruhi in a room with 6 other guys so she can potentially fall in love. This falls in line with how tomboyism is seen as acceptable, but only up to a certain age for girls. A young girl can be or dress boyish, but once they get out of their preteens, they must start to embrace girlhood. The view that anyone who is AFAB will eventually become feminine is just reinforcing gender roles. I remember when I grew up, I really loved how androgynous Haruhi was, but always was a little upset that the characters were forcing her to present more feminine, putting her in dresses and treating her like a doll. This felt all too reminiscent of how others treated me when I was dressing more boyish. Dressing in that way was seen as just a phase before I was blossoming for my soon-to-be husband that apparently mattered at the age of 14. That doesn't mean that cross-dressing series can't be gender subverting though. When done correctly, or even in some cases incorrectly, it still gives teens an alternate way of how they can view themselves. It shows that they don't have to strictly fall within a gender binary, whether that means they identify as a boy and like to dress as a girl, or vice versa. They can even fall out of the binary entirely, identifying as solely themselves rather than a boy or a girl. I do believe that the manga series Cinderella Closet has been doing an amazing job in this regard so far. The main character in the series, Haruka, doesn't feel feminine enough as a girl and meets a person named Hikaru who helps her out. We find out that Hikaru enjoys cross-dressing and feels their best when dressing in feminine clothes. Once we have this reveal, Hikaru is then referred to with they pronouns, spending most of the time in these 2 volumes that are currently available in dresses, wigs, and makeup. Hikaru is neither strictly a boy or strictly a girl. They do as they please, performing as whatever gender makes them feel the most comfortable that day. The series even acknowledges that Hikaru has lost friends in the past because they fall out of the binary. People have found them strange, and that dressing as a woman means that they're someone to avoid. However, Haruka accepts Hikaru right away. She doesn't care that they dress differently, she just likes Hikaru for being Hikaru. The Cinderella Closet does also fall into a straight relationship. The difference that I see with this series, though, is that Hikaru is never pushed to present as something socially acceptable. In fact, Hikaru is often coming on to Haruka when they are presenting feminine. From any outsider perspective, these are 2 sapphics having a lovely moment in the park together. Sure, they aren't actually, although I would argue that this could still be a good way for a femme teen to explore their sexuality in a way that wouldn't make them face scrutiny. It's kind of encased in a way that society wouldn't view it as subversive while still being subversive. There will always be pros and cons to anything that explores something as expansive and unknown as gender. Nothing will ever be able to get the nuances of these performances for people exactly right. Some may even fall into the gender roles they tried to subvert along the way. Even throughout this video, I may have done the same, since gender is different for everyone. Something that may resonate with my own identity may not for someone else, even if we go by the same labels. It's the mere fact that there are so many shoujo and women behind these manga that try to tackle these topics that subvert gender expectations. A demographic of manga that was initially created as a way to make people assigned female at birth fall in line with what's expected of them has turned into a place where these performances can be questioned. Why women must be feminine and weak and men be masculine and assertive in this society. Questioning these binaries set on us by birth. Shoujo has always made me feel comfortable in my own skin. Whether I wanted to dress masculine or feminine throughout my life, I've always felt seen when reading shoujo, since there was always something that resonated with me. Lately, while I don't want people to see me as a girl, I have felt seen by the characters of Yoi and Hikaru, both of whom are able to perform their gender in different ways than what is expected of them. Yoi is effortlessly cool, and Hikaru has a brazen confidence about them. These two characters for me right now are probably what Haruhi was for me in the past, and what characters like Lady Oscar were for others before me, showing teenagers that there isn't just one way to perform their gender. There are hundreds of thousands of ways that are all unique to us in our own experiences. This is why the last thing I want to do in this video is ask you guys to share your own experiences of gender in shoujo and how it's affected you throughout the years. I would love to have not just my own views be the main focus of this video, but also how shoujo helped shape you guys as well.